Hiya, welcome back to my channel. I thought a change of scenery might be nice today, although you may hear some traffic from the road. If you don't know me, my name is Nicole. I am a graduate school student majoring in history, about to start on my master's thesis. And here on this channel, I don't really do videos based on what month it is or what holiday is coming up because, quite frankly, I'm not organized enough for that. But this is kind of a happy coincidence because it's a topic that I already wanted to do a video on soon, and here we are with the 4th of July. I would say, or perhaps hope, that if you are an American, you have at some point or another read our Declaration of Independence. But what does it mean? It's a lot of big words and vague accusations against the crown. And I think sometimes as a nation, we kind of get caught up in this romanticized nationalist version of our history, especially when we're celebrating holidays like this, and we kind of forget to dig deeper and think critically about the events of our past. What I'm going to examine today is not the entirety of the Declaration of Independence. I don't have enough time for that. I could probably spend a year making videos on that. I want to look at just one specific section. The final accusation made against King George in this document. And it reads, quote, "He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us, and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions." Now, that's downright slanderous against the Native American tribes if you know anything about their history with morning wars and how their warfare changed with the arrival of the Europeans, especially when the British and the French were more than happy to use those tribes against their European enemies. So there's a lot there to go over that we're going to skip over today, but I just wanted to kind of point that out for a minute, that's just downright unfair. And this accusation isn't really an accusation against King George either. It's laid at his feet, but it's actually referencing the actions of one of his royal governors, Lord Dunmore. And if that name rings a bell for you, there's a pretty good reason why. I did a video on the Battle of Point Pleasant that makes up Lord Dunmore's war. I will put a video link up here so that you can catch up on that if you would like. Because like I said, the Declaration, it's vague. The accusations in there are purposely vague. It's like a prosecutor almost with his opening statement and when he's deciding on what charges to lay against a defendant. He's going to do everything he can to try, to charge with as much as he can in the hope that the majority of it will stick. But he knows that a defendant isn't necessarily going to be found guilty of everything. And in this case, the jury, it's almost like a court of public opinion. They have this Declaration of Independence, but it's going to be up to the people who read it to determine, is that a valid accusation or not? And in the case of the Declaration of Independence, it's not even public opinion really that decides it. It is decided on the battlefield. But with a lot of these vague accusations, we can't be completely sure what all they had in mind when they wrote them. This one, though, historians are pretty sure we do know exactly. Like I said, Lord Dunmore. But he's not necessarily the only agent of the crown that's had some of these bright ideas. Pauline Maier, in her book American Scripture, which talks about basically the background of the Declaration of Independence and how it came about, how it was written, all the different changes to it, she identifies two others. The British captain Henry Mowat in his actions against Falmouth, Maine, and Governor Guy Carleton of Quebec. She identifies both of those as likely kind of being in the back of their minds as well. But historians have basically agreed that Lord Dunmore, his actions were just like the most nefarious and what people had in mind, really, when they talked about this. So, what did he do? In the fall of 1775, he did two things, really, that got everyone up in arms. The first, he used his old friend John Connolly from Lord Dunmore's war. And he had him try to raise the Native American tribes along the frontier to get them to agree to fight alongside frontier loyalists and British troops from Detroit, thinking that, if they can get all of these people together to fight, they can attack from the west, and basically have another theater of war going on that will weaken the colonies even more. Because let's face it, at this point, war's coming. Just because it hasn't been declared doesn't mean they don't know about it. In September of 1775, remember I said this all happens in the fall, Connolly actually shows up in Boston to bring this plan to General Gage and try to get his help with it. Now, if you don't remember hearing about this in history class, that's because the plan fell through. Connolly would be arrested in Maryland by their Committee of Safety, and all of the plotting would be uncovered. So it wasn't that they actually succeeded, it was the fact that they even were going to try. The second thing, which was probably much bigger in the eyes of colonists at the time, was Lord Dunmore's proclamation that he issued on November 7th. In it, he stated his intent was to defeat the traitors against the crown, basically by any means necessary. And to do this, he proclaimed, quote, "I do hereby further declare all indented servants, Negroes, or others appertaining to rebels, free, that are able and willing to bear arms, they joining his Majesty's troops as soon as may be, for the more speedily reducing this colony to a proper sense of duty to his Majesty's crown and dignity," end quote. Well, that just went over splendidly, as I'm sure you can imagine. Depriving rebels of their servants and slaves, while having new cannon fodder to use on the battlefield, was a brilliant tactical move, which has been used at other times in our history. But, it makes a lot of people angry, and it really isn't showing any more respect for the indentured servants and slaves than their masters had. Either way, it's about using them for their own gain, not because you care one iota about their freedom. And did I say that went over splendidly? Yeah, I think I did. Let's look at what Washington had to say about it. Because George Washington, on December 15th of 1775, once word got around, he wrote to Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Reed, and he said, quote, "If the Virginians are wise, that arch traitor to the rights of humanity, Lord Dunmore, should be instantly crushed, if it takes the force of the whole colony to do it. Otherwise, like a snowball in rolling, his army will get sides, some through fear, some through promises, and some from inclination joining his standard. But that which renders the measure indispensably necessary is the Negroes. For if he gets formidable, numbers of them will be tempted to join, who will be afraid to do it without. I am exceedingly happy to find that that villain Connolly is seized. I hope, if there is anything to convict him, that he will meet with the punishment due to his demerit and treachery." End quote. Now, Washington is not the only enraged Virginian. Jefferson's draft of the Declaration of Independence included a far more specific and elaborate accusation against the crown. Now, Robert Middlekauff describes it as Jefferson's attempt to, quote, "cast the king as the perpetrator of slavery in America, as well as the instigator of racial violence. The first charge was absurd, and the second true in only a limited sense. Governor Dunmore of Virginia had called upon blacks to rise against their masters and promised them freedom in return. But as Congress knew, white Americans, not the king, had instituted slavery and had maintained it. Congress removed almost all of Jefferson's denunciation, retaining only the charge, whose meaning was not altogether clear, that the king has excited domestic insurrections amongst us." Now, this is not to say that you had to be a Southerner and a slave owner to be offended. When the Pennsylvania Journal reprinted the proclamation on December 6th of 1775, they included a comment on it that said the proclamation, among other things, showed Dunmore's, quote, "malice and treachery against the people who were once under his government, and his officious violation of all law, justice, and humanity," end quote. So, it wasn't just that there were some slave owners or, people who held indentured servants that were offended by this. They saw it as an affront on their rights in general. Their rights, their human rights, essentially, is what they're saying, was to own someone else. And that's something, of course, that we're going to have to deal with further down the road in our history. But that's why you don't have to just be a Southerner to be upset, because at that time, any affront on our rights was a problem. Whether they would have otherwise had a moral problem with it or not, all of a sudden, because war is approaching, they're pretty much getting upset about anything of that nature. The historian Merrill Jensen, he went so far as to assert that the proclamation, quote, did more to convert many Virginians to the idea of independence than all the acts of Parliament since the founding of the colonies, end quote. Let that sink in for a moment. Really? Really? Not the Tea Act, not the Stamp Act, not any of the Intolerable Acts, not the Molasses Act that, went back decades with that tax, but the proclamation of Lord Dunmore. As I said, Dunmore's actions took place in fall of 1775. In July of 1776, the United States of America asserted their independence from Great Britain with a Declaration of Independence. Now, what I've talked about in this video is specific to that one accusation against the crown. I'm not saying that other accusations didn't have perhaps, a more solid foundation, but I'm hoping that this topic will encourage you to look at our past a little bit more critically. Dive deeper into the meaning behind words that we've just always accepted, and perhaps understand our past a little bit better than you did before. If you like this video, make sure you hit the like button down below and subscribe if you haven't already. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will see y'all in the next video.